table right now, but we are trying to selecting the data. We are trying to retrieving the data on existing table, which means let's assume we stored a lot of data in the table and we are trying to pull the specific criteria. I want to see my details, or I want to see all the customer details. So we are trying to see the each and every report. Now basically before you start any select statement, there are two classes you have to know about this. So from class is the first one. But I will show you what exactly how to write a code select and from. But basically the select class we can use to select the columns, because yesterday we created a lot of columns in the customer, right? Customer name, customer address, customer ID, and also customer gender, all this information. But now what I want to do, I just want to see the customer ID and customer name. Out of 6 columns, I want to see just only 2 columns. So how can I do that? Just select. In that select class, you can put the column names. What are the columns you want to see? So either ID, name, or address. So based on that select class, the results will be displayed, whatever the columns you selected on the SQL. And from class is you are going to select the table and which table you are going to be retrieve the data. And for example, if I wants to select the data from the customer table, then my from class from customer, which means we are going to be retrieving the data from customer table. But if you want to select only limitation of the table columns, then you have to provide the information in the select class. Let's take a look basic introduction about the select. Before you start any T-SQL, as I mentioned, our T-SQL is always be we have to develop in the Management Studio. So after you install the software on your computer, then you have to go and open the Management Studio. So I just click on the Management Studio. Now this Management Studio is already open for me. So whenever you start, you will get like this pop-up, which means you are going to provide the server name for the SQL server. So here this is my SQL server name. Now when I click or connect, then the SQL server will connect. So which means we are going to be work on this SQL server. And one more important, when you see this SQL server, you see there are a lot of folders available. Currently we are going to focus on only database folder, so forget about rest of the folders because those are used for the administration purpose, which means the DBA role. So as a developer, we are going to be retrieve or insert or data manipulation, modifying the data. So now let's start with the database. So expand the database. As I mentioned that you have to be restore the AdventureWorks 2012 and also AdventureWorks TW 2012 databases. So to start with the your practice test, you must have to be install these two databases on your SQL server. If it is not, then if you have any difficulties with the installation, please let me know. We can work together after finishing the class. So now once you start expanding, and you can choose any database you want to work. Currently let's start work with the AdventureWorks 2012 because my all the scripts are which is I prepared in the previous classes. So all the scripts are belongs to the AdventureWorks 2012 database. Now whenever you select or whenever you run the query, you have to be choose which database against you are running for, because if I let's say if I run this, you have to be select the database on the top. You see when you expand this, you will see all the databases which are available. It is showing here. So whenever you run the select statement or whenever you run the query, you have to be select the appropriate database, because we are running the query against the table and we have to know the table is existed on the database or not. What is the basic criteria here? We are creating the databases and each databases we are creating some tables. On those tables we are going to store the data. So if if I run, let's say this query, basically it is against AdventureWorks 2012, but if I change the database to the DW, then it will I think this is existed. Let me go back into the other database. So if I run this, oh sorry, again I just provided a database name, that's why it is executing. Just let me remove this database name. So now if I select this query AdventureWorks 2012, it will run fine because this table is existed in AdventureWorks. If I select the different database, then what happened, it is showing the error message because it is invalid object name person.person. So when this is the most common error, um, even you have experience, and also even if after you join the job, sometimes you will see this kind of error, invalid object name, which means that the table is not existed on the database. So the basically the if you wants to run the smooth of this query successfully without any issues, then you have to be select the appropriate database. So if you select the master database, then this query is going to be run against the master database. Now we are going to be run this query against the AdventureWorks 2012. So basically when you develop the query, you can provide a database name here. So the syntax is, you can from class, so from class you have to be select the table, right? That is our basic criteria. So instead of you can, so now we don't have any database name, just we are pulling the table name. So now we have to be physically select the specific database name here. But if you wants to be provide the database name here, then you don't have to worry about here, because the whenever the from class, first it will go to the database, then it will go to the schema. Don't worry about, you don't know the schema, but just I'm telling. So the database, schema, and table name. So we are logically defined in the from class. But if you wants to, if you don't define like this, then it is directly going into the specified database which you provided here, and it is looking for this table. So that table is not existed. So my query currently I defined with the database name and schema and table name. So it is better to define database name. I mean, if you don't define it is not a big deal, but it is better to define the database name than if you wants to pull, for example, my like person.person table. It suppose it might be existed in the other database, and the database data is different. So what will happen then, when you by mistake if you select this, then it will pull the data. So it is better practice to add the database name, and if you don't, it doesn't matter. So now that is the basic of you selecting the database. Now what I want to do, let's first focus on the all records. So as I mentioned, from class. So from class, which one second, so from class, so we are going to be select the data from this person.person table. Now as I mentioned, select class is the main class which you can define what are the results you want to see. So now what I want to see is, first I want to see all the columns from this table. Then how can I do? Select star. So star means which is going to be display all the column results on this query. Let's see if I run this select star from. Now you will see I have a columns, and all the column information and all the row information is displayed. So everything is displayed based on the select star. So this is basic, and if you joined as a fresher, then they will ask that if I want to display the all rows from the table, then what is the select class? I have to select star from the table. But now as I mentioned, if you wants to be display on the filtered classes, like I want to be, instead of all these columns, I just want to see only basic columns, so only 3 columns, so business entity ID, first name and last name. Then how can we define? So from class is the same, we are going to be select the table and select, instead of star you are going to be defined column names. So forget about this right now. So what we're going to do, we are, let's say I just want to close this, so make sure you don't confuse it. So now we got these results, select from. So before we had a star. Now what I want to do, I just want to be select any class, any column. So let's say I want to select first name, comma, I want to select middle name. If I run this query, and the results will be displayed only 2 columns. You see, so now we just displaying the only 2 columns. If you wants to be more column, then you can have to be put comma and select the column name whatever you wants to be. So this is basically the, you learn basic select and also the basic star from the select, and also you learn basic from class. So one more important I want to show you is alias. So alias means, for example, if I okay, forget about alias now because it is not right time to talk about that. So you will come to know about the alias when we start with the joins. So, and also one more important thing, why we have to be put comma here. So one more important information is here. For example, I select business entity ID and first name and then again last name. So I forgot to put the comma here. So let's take a look how the results display here. If I select, instead of selecting this, let me show you the results with comma and without comma. So now I'm running the 2 queries here. So one query is with comma and another one is without comma. So if I run this, now you see the first query displayed 3 columns and the second query displayed 2 columns. And one thing you notice, we are selecting the first name, but you see the result is showing as a last name. So the reason why I'm talking now is, I think it's a focus, we have to focus on alias now. So first name, and instead of displaying the first name, we are providing the alias name. Alias name is alternate name of the display. So whenever I get the first name, and the results we are getting as a first name column from this table, but to display we are going to be defining the another name, last name. See, for example, if I put the last name here and I just put test. So here now we are going to see the last name as a column name. But if you run the above query again, you will see the test as the column name. Why? Because we are providing the alias. So alias means substitution of the name, like alternate name for, but actual true we are selecting the different column data, but displaying pattern is different. Why we need that? For example, if you have a Bank of America account, then your transactions are, like for example, you are looking for your monthly transactions. So monthly transactions, the back end, the table may be price something, price or something, transaction price, but to display the results for the user, there should be some meaningful name, because the display of the name should be different. Then we can use the alias as a display when you're displaying the application or reports. So same way we can provide the alias for the table. For example, in future classes you will learn, we are going to be use multiple tables from the from class. So when you use the multiple tables, you have to be select the different columns from the different tables. So instead of selecting the each table dot column name, you just provide alias. So this alias we are going to be used all over the place. So you will understand more details in the joining class, but let's focus on the column alias right now. So here we have a business name, first name, last name. So what I am trying to say here is, if you forget the comma, any column defined, then the SQL Server assumes that this is the alias name. So alias means that is the alternate name for the displaying. And if I put the comma, then the SQL Server assume that okay, these are the columns are separated and try to pull the data. So that is the basic difference when you define the comma and without comma. And we will learn now why we need alias exactly. So let's take a look here. So now what we want to do is, we want to display the business entity ID, first name, last name. So basically whenever